What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the world according to Briggs. It is time to head back to the Lone Star State, Texas. Texas in the last decade has been consistently one of the most moved to states in the country. For good reason. They do a lot of things right. Taxes aren't crazy. They have enticed a lot of big corporations to move to the state, decent schools in most places, and low crime rates on average. But as people make the move to Texas, prices are going up, from housing to lap dances and everything in between. All the major cities are seeing a steady climb in the cost of living and housing. Not anywhere near what LA, San Francisco, New York City, but they're heading that direction. The good news is there's plenty of places in Texas that are still really cheap in both housing and cost of living. Some are a good distance from a big city, so if you can work remotely or you're retired and really don't need a job, you could save a lot of money living in one of the towns on this list. Let's take a look. Number 10, Plainview, Texas. Plainview is a town in Texas with a population of about 20,000 residents. It's in what they call the Panhandle of Texas, between Amarillo and Lubbock. Living in Plainview offers the residents kind of a suburb, but it's also really sparse. It's weird. It's kind of spread out. I mean, there's not houses right on top of each other, which is a good thing. Most of the residents own their own home, and many families live in Plainview. Low crime and the public schools in Plainview are above average, so it's a good place to live. It can get a little hot here in the summers, and as one subscriber explained, it can get really boring, like with a capital B. Their words, not mine. Now, I don't believe that one for a minute. I mean, come on. They have the Jimmy Dean Sausage Museum in town for all you sausage enthusiasts. It's really just called the Jimmy Dean Museum, but he's the sausage guy, so it's the Jimmy Dean Sausage Museum as far as this YouTuber is concerned. The cost of living in Plainview is 19% lower than the national average, and the housing is actually 50% lower than the national average. A decent home can be found for under $110,000, and the nicer ones start off around $160,000, $170,000. They go up a bit, but yeah, you can get a nice home here for about $160,000, $175,000. Number 9, Elsa, Texas. Elsa is a suburb of McAllen, Texas, with a population of just a little over 7,000. Living in Elsa, you get that suburb and rural feeling again. It's kind of nice. The houses aren't right on top of each other, and, just outside of town, there's open space. Sure, it's desert, but it's still open. Now, these stats also go for the nearby suburbs of Edcouch and La Villa if you're from Connecticut or something. They all have close to the same stats and figures. But let's focus on Elsa. I've been to all three of the cities here, and one thing I will tell you, they all have really good tacos. I don't know what that's all about. It's, close to the border. These are largely Hispanic communities, but man, the Mexican food here is amazing. So that's a plus. The cost of living in Elsa is 32% lower than the national average, and the housing cost is 69% lower than the national average. You can buy a home that needs some work for under $150,000, and a nice one will start around $230,000. Now, keep in mind, everyone has their own opinion on what's a nice house and what's not, so take a look at Zillow and you decide. But in my opinion, they've got some nice houses here for $230,000 to $260,000. And great tacos. Number 8, Presidio, Texas. Presidio is a very small town of about 1,000 people. It is a border town on the Rio Grande near Big Bend National Park. That's Big Bend as in bending something, not Big Bend like in England. It is small, but there are some positives. The first one is, you know everyone. If you've ever lived in a small town of about 1,000 people or less, you tend to know everyone in town, or at least you know every family in town, things like that. There's no traffic here, and there's no crime. Very little crime, I should say. I know I mentioned this before, but if you watch too much political theater these days, you think that any town near the Mexico border is overrun and you need bulletproof windows, bars on the doors, and a guard dog just to be able to watch The Masked Singer in peace. It's just not true. There's very little crime in most border towns. The cost of living is 26% lower than the national average, and the housing is 70% lower. To be honest, it is hard to find a house for over $200,000 here. All the houses you might be able to get anywhere from $75,000, not even kidding, to $175,000. They're going to need a little work. Not much, but they'll probably need a little work. It's a nice place to buy a house if you don't mind a desert town. Number 7, Del Rio, Texas. Del Rio's a small, quiet, safe town near the Laughlin Air Force Base with a population of 36,000 residents. But really, this place doesn't seem like it has that many people. I haven't been there in years, I'll give you that, so it might have changed a lot. I liked it back then. Great Mexican food and great culture. The guy I know that lives there said that it has changed. Less tacos and more Wingstops and Whataburgers these days, but it's still nice and it's still very safe. He actually lives on the reservoir just outside of town. When I knew him, he lived in town. town. Guess he's moved on up. The cost of living is 20% lower than the national average, and the housing is 54% lower than the national average. Houses here seem to have this magic number, $139,000. I saw a bunch of places for that price. The good houses start around $250,000, but most of the houses for sale here are below $200,000, and they're not terrible. They do have an Amtrak station in town, so you can go to San Antonio, just a quick 3-hour trip. The bummer is that train leaves the station in Del Rio at 1:30 a.m., so I don't know how often people take it to San Antonio. Number 6, Ozona, Texas. To most, Ozona, Texas is just a place you pee when you're driving west from San Antonio. To the people that know about Ozona, they know it's much better than just a place where you relieve your bladder. The town was organized in 1891 under an oak tree, which still stands to this day. At the base of the tree is a historical marker describing the events of the day. The town has a large statue of Davy Crockett and a museum dedicated to the politician and frontiersman from Tennessee. Ozona is actually in Crockett County, Texas. In case you're wondering about all the Davy love here, he died at the Alamo in San Antonio. And that's about it for this town. Nothing else exciting goes on here. Other than the cost of living is 13% lower than the national average, and housing is 54% lower than the national average. You can get a house here, and it is desert, and so it might not be for everyone, but every single house that's for sale here is under $190,000. The ones that need a little work are under $100,000. You can also get 100 acres of land for $100,000. You could do pretty good here with not a bunch of money. Number 5, Olney, Texas. Olney is a cute town with a family-orientated vibe. The community has several parks, including one near the public pool. Downtown is great, sort of that country-style, old-school Main Street thing going on. The downside is, it's a little light in the entertainment department. And that probably has something to do with Olney being a dry town. High school football and that whole Friday Night Lights thing is about it. Pretty much that's it in a lot of small towns in Texas. That they go off on Friday night football at the local high school. The cost of living in Olney is 26% lower than the national average, and housing is 65% lower. You could buy a house for under $50,000 here. They're going to need some work, don't get me wrong, coat of paint, grass seeds, maybe a new roof, but you get a 2 to 3 bedroom house, front yard, backyard for under $50,000, and it's livable. Number 4, Hebbronville. In the late 1800s, this place was nothing but scrub brush. By the 1920s, Hebbronville was born, and it was the largest cattle shipping point in the United States. It still has cattle, but nothing like it once was. This is a great town with great tamales at Hillcrest Tortillas. They have a company that makes tortillas and tamales, and it's great. Especially when a business stays in a small town like this, it's really good. Hebbronville has about 5,000 residents, and it isn't far from the middle of the frickin' desert. This place is an hour or two from everywhere. It's like a geographical oddity, but that's sort of the appeal for Hebbronville. The cost of living here is 30% lower than the national average, and housing is 58% lower. A ready-to-move-in house that will need a little cleanup will be under $100,000. Past $200,000, you can get some really nice homes in Hebbronville. Number 3, Haskell, Texas. Haskell is a place you end up if you leave Abilene looking for excitement and you go north by mistake instead of east. Haskell has great stats and everything but employment and things to do. So if you work remotely and you're not looking for a good time and you make over $50,000 a year, you could live like a king here. If you drive to the town square area of Haskell, nothing has changed in the last 70 years, except for the cars parked on the street and the fancy electric sign out in front of the courthouse. The cost of living in Haskell is 24% lower than the national average, and housing is 65% lower. Houses are livable right now for as low as $25,000, and they go up to about $150,000. And when they get into $150,000, you might get an acre with the land. There's one house for sale here for $294,000. That would be $750,000 here in the Portland area, and in LA, it would be over $2 million, I'm sure. They're selling 175 acres for less than I bought my house here in Portland. Number 2, Bracketville, Texas. Okay, buckle up. You're going to think I'm jerking you around on this one, but there are no houses for sale and may never have been for sale for over $150,000 in Bracketville. That is normally a real estate fact reserved for places like the Arctic Circle and the middle of the African savanna. That's right, you can get African savanna prices in Texas, and you don't have to worry about being trampled to death by a wildebeest while drinking your sweet tea. The cost of living in Bracketville is 26% lower than the national average, and the housing costs are 71% lower. That's crazy cheap. And number 1, Pampa, Texas. Pampa is the type of American town that has a homecoming parade downtown and everyone in town shows up. That's America. This is a great place to raise a family. It has parks all over the place, including a local water park, which is surprisingly nice for the size of the town. I was kind of shocked by that one. The cost of living in Pampa is 25% lower than the national average, and housing is about 52% lower than the national average. Other than the heat, this is a great place to live. You know, it's well documented in all my videos. I'm not a big fan of the heat. I like rain. I like cold. You're not going to get much rain and cold there, but you are going to get some heat, obviously during the summer. Now here's the good thing. A livable home here starts at under $30,000, and the nicer ones, you're talking low 200,000s. This is a great place to live, and that's why it's number one. It may not be the cheapest on this list, but in my opinion, it's one of the better ones, especially if you're looking to relocate with a family. They actually even have some jobs here. Some of the other ones were like no jobs anywhere, and that's part of the reason they're so dirt cheap. This one actually has jobs, it has things to do, the schools are decent, cost of living is low. You could do so much worse than Pampa, Texas. Alright, so that's today's list. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Don't forget all the links below. Buy a t-shirt. Give the video a big thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Everybody have a great day. Be nice to each other.